Hello and welcome back to Mastering UX. Today we're going to be talking about a crucial aspect of user experience design, and that is labels. So what are labels? Well, labels are text elements that describe the purpose of a user interface component, such as a link, a button, a form field, or a navigation menu. They guide users in their interactions with a product, and they provide context, and they're very crucial for usability. Why are labels so important? Well, misleading or neglecting labels leads to confusion, frustration, and ultimately a poor user experience. Without clear and effective labels, users may struggle to understand how to use your product, regardless of how visually organized it is. After conducting numerous usability tests, what I found is that labels more than visual design was the most obvious cause for misunderstanding and confusion. So to be clear, labeling and visual design are not mutually exclusive. They really work together to create a cohesive, user-friendly interface. Good visual design can enhance the effectiveness of labels by making them more noticeable and easier to read, and well-designed labels can enhance the visual appeal of a product by adding clarity and structure. So there are some guidelines for using labels. Let's dive into some of these guidelines. Well, the first one is clarity and brevity. Labels should be clear, concise, and avoid using jargon or technical terms that might confuse users. For clarity, labels should accurately represent the functionality and content they're associated with. So, to give you an example, an online bookstore, they might have a label for submitting a review, and that button should be clear and indicative of what its function is, such as post review versus submit. And we also really want to strive for brevity. For example, you might have a label that says create account for a registration button, but but you don't want to do something that's unnecessarily long, like register for a new account. Certainly, never use a label that goes click here to register for a new account. And the reason why is click here as a label adds no value. It puts all the onus and the responsibility on the subsequent text. So I want to point out that there may be always this kind of tension between clarity and brevity. You want to be somewhat expressive and descriptive, but sometimes that causes it to be too long. And then there's other times where you're striving to be having something that has brevity. It's short in length, may cause you to lose the clarity. What I want to emphasize is that you always want to remember that user research, understanding your business goals, having some thoughtfulness about what are the precedents that are already established are all things that need to be weighed into the balance of the decisions that you're making. So design has always been this kind of multifactorial design. It's always been some art of trade-offs. And so we really want to make sure that we do want to keep labels short. We do want to have them have this kind of explanation, but we also want to make sure that it always has to be taken into context of the specific project that we're working on. Consistency. What I would say is that use consistent terminology across your site or your application. If you use the word cart in one place and you switch to basket in another, this can really throw off users. Labels should be intuitive. Labels should be something that's obvious. For example, if you're designing this kind of search button, label it search instead of something like go or proceed. Another one is to eliminate happy talk. Labels should be informative and to the point. For a sign up button for a newsletter, you should label it sign up for a newsletter rather than something overly promotional and less informative like join the fun. There's another part on this matter of having navigation that's descriptive. So use labels that are clear and descriptive for each category. For example, in an e-commerce site, you might use specific labels like men's clothing and women's clothing and kids clothing instead of something as removed as products. The last point I want to make here is testing. Conduct usability testing to ensure that your labels are clear and understandable. What's intuitive on one site and for one audience may not be what's intuitive for another set of users. For instance, if you're unsure about whether the label shopping bag is clear to your users, as opposed to shopping cart, what you could do is you could do a usability test and you can ask real users to perform a task involving that label. And if the users struggle with the task, that may indicate that there's a problem with your label. Now let's look at some additional tips. What I want to say is that the positioning of labels really matters. For form fields, it's really best and it's typical that when it's placed above when it's placed above or to the left, but it really is better to have that form field that's really placed above it. And the reason why this is people scan from top to bottom and left to right. For example, in a login form, it might say username. That username should be just placed right directly above the input field. And I would also want to note that it's been found that using the label inside the form field and then it disappears, it's still problematic to have that label inside the form field. Visual design. So the visual presentation of labels is also very important. They should be easily readable, distinguishable from other elements, and they should be visually connected to the other elements that they're labeling. For interface navigation and information design, labels are a key component of the design. They should be placed in a consistent location and use a consistent format to help users predict where they can find information and how to interact with the site. The fourth one is accessibility. Labels should be accessible to all users. And so for this, we realize that there's assistive technologies like screen readers, and they use HTML labels, which may not be visible to the regular screen browser, but they do have information that is for other browsers who have disabilities. The fifth one I want to point out is that labels are also important for search engine optimization. Labels are particularly in the form of headings, alt tags. These really help the search engines understand the content of the page, and they can improve the page's search engine rankings. I want to say this is all the content that I have for labels today, and I just want you to remember that labeling, it's really about clarity, simplicity, and meeting users' needs. It's a crucial part of creating a user-friendly interface that's not only visually appealing, but also intuitive and easy to use. So I want to really thank you for getting this far and watching this video. So please don't forget to like, share, subscribe for more UX design educational content like this, which comes out about every 2 weeks. My name is Ken and you're watching Mastering UX.